especially when it comes from therapists who are generally very big-hearted people, very compassionate people. They have a lot of empathy. That's why they go into therapy. And they can't fathom the idea of going to war and taking a human life and not being affected by that.
Sure.
So in a way, what they're doing is they're pushing this idea of what you did was wrong. And if you don't feel bad about it, there's something wrong with you onto the person they're working with.
Hey everybody, Jordan Murphy again with another episode of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Conversations about the defining moments that shape our lives. So just a little bit of housekeeping as usual. For those of you who have been listening and supporting me since the beginning of this podcast, thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. And if you've been supporting, listening, maybe not sharing, I'm just going to ask you to consider that if you're enjoying what you're hearing, to consider that there may be others who might like it who you know. You know what I'm saying? Send them the link. Send them to iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. It's available all over the place. Another thing that's really helpful is if you are liking it, and if you can take a couple minutes and go to iTunes and rate it and review it, that also helps with my ranking, just kind of boosting things up a little bit higher. Enough of the ask. There's also a couple nice little promos through Amazon available. They are partially responsible for this podcast today. So if you go to breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com, you'll see the two banners on there for Amazon Fresh and the Amazon Fire TV stick. Check those out. Great promotional opportunities. So let's get on with the show. Today's show, I have a guest named David Parke. Now, before becoming a board-certified coach through the Center of Credentialing and Education, who specializes in strategic intervention, hypnosis, and neurolinguistic programming, David Parke spent most of his adult life in the military, serving as a Navy diver, an Army Ranger. He spent 8 years as a military advisor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, because of his background, he has firsthand experience with populations who have taken lives and may, of course, experience post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, today, we're going to discuss some of his breakthroughs, of course, his career as well, as talk about the subject of two books he wrote, one being Coach with Courage and The Kill Book, which deal with fear, as well as the subject of killing. Go figure, right? Considering it's called The Kill Book. Sounds uplifting, right? But actually, these subjects are potentially uplifting because, the intention within the books is solution. So now that I've done this big drum roll introduction of David Parke, David, how are you?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I know that was a big mouthful there, but I want people to kind of have a context for who you are. And what was really interesting was, the context that we met in was so surreal in and of itself, because here we are, you have a very diverse background compared to mine. I mean, the amount that you've done in your life. And then where do we meet? We meet at a loft in downtown New York shooting a commercial, right? We're like on set and we're having a conversation in between takes, and somehow it spills out. I don't even know what you said. I think you asked me if I'd served in the military.
Yeah, because of some of the language you were using.
Right,
exactly,
some of the language I was using, which was just slang that had no relation to my non-experience in the military. But nonetheless, it opened a door. And suddenly, this guy who was one of the principals in this commercial I was working on ended up becoming a guest on my podcast because of the very, very unique and interesting background that you have. And we had a lot to talk about that I said, stop talking. I want to do this on a podcast. So, all right. So, gosh, where do we start? Now, obviously, I want to talk about whatever your breakthrough or breakthroughs are. And I know that I'm sure, we'll get to that, but I'm like, where does one start? Because let's see, what's so interesting, I think, about your story is the hopscotching you've done from military branch to military branch.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about that a little bit in the video that you shared with me, which I thought was very generous. It was one of the things that was interesting to me in talking to you as somebody who has served in the military, seen combat, substantial combat, and was willing to be very generous in your sharing about it. And then also to go so far as to be introspective enough to identify what makes you tick and why you do what you do. So why don't you tell me a little bit, because I tell the listeners a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I started out when I was 19 in the Marine Reserves. I spent a year there, and the first Desert Shield started up. I wanted to go. There was, I wasn't, it's hard to explain. I've been kind of a studying Buddhist since I was probably about 14, I've always been sort of introspective and spiritually inclined, but also there was always this call, that I wanted. It wasn't for the military as much as it was for combat, if that makes any kind of sense at all. So I spent I started out in the Marine Reserve, and the first Gulf War started. I was not going to go because I wasn't fully qualified in my job yet. So I transferred over to the Navy, active duty Navy, to become a corpsman, which is a medic who serves with Marines in combat, and also in the Navy in general. And by the time I finished my second boot camp and then the medical training, the war was over. So I kind of shifted gears and became a diving medical technician, a hard hat diver in the Navy. And then I did my time in the Navy, got out, spent a couple of years, about 3 years around the San Francisco area. I stayed in the Guard, but I bounced at some nightclubs, was the floor manager at a nightclub, then started working corrections. Did not like that. So, and I still had this yearning. So I went at 27, I went back into the military, into the Army, and joined the Army Rangers, and became a sniper for them. And then, from there, was a sniper for them, got out, joined a military intelligence unit, learned Arabic. 9/11 happened while I was learning Arabic, actually. And then I went to work as a military consultant, or sort of a paramilitary consultant, and spent the vast majority of 8 years, like 6 to 8 months a year, in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Wow. That's all you did.
That's it. In a nutshell.
Okay. Now, yeah. I'm sorry. Tell me the timeline then again. You said this was the first stint, Marine wise, was age 19?
Yeah. Was 19 to 20.
Okay. So 19, and now you're in your what, mid 40s?
I am 48 right now.
48. Okay.
Almost 49. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So 30 years.
Yeah.
That was quick math on my part, right? Pretty awesome.
Yeah. Nailed it.
I'm just that good. So, all right. So let's think about this, or let me ask you this. Now, is it common to jump from one branch to the next?
No, not at all.
Okay, I didn't think so, because I always hear specifically, the Navy or the Marines say to the Navy, we just have you guys around to give us rides to go places, or
right,
there's always combat. I mean, you've even spoken about the SEALs against the Rangers. I mean, it's like it's not common. Why did you need to go from one branch to the next?
I never, while I was in one branch, I don't think I was ever, I don't know if I was ever like, oh, now I need to go do this. It's just that, I don't know, it just kind of happened. And things, I guess I was looking for something. And while I loved everything I did, I loved being a Marine. I loved being a Navy diver. I loved being an Army Ranger. I loved being, an advisor, consultant. Mm-hmm. They were all very different. Yeah. They all had, even though they were all the military, I loved something different about each one of those things, and they were all very, very different jobs. So none of them felt the same, even though they were all technically military.
Right. Okay. So you say something about this in one of your interviews, which I thought was generously insightful. I don't know. This is perhaps a stereotype on my part, but, I don't know that I've come across or heard many military guys who are as generous with their introspection, let's just say. They're not warm and fuzzy, and they're, and I think that when, or willing, or let me rephrase this, willing to occur vulnerable, maybe is a better way of putting it. I think there's plenty of warm and fuzzy guys out there who are also could kill you, but I think there's something about a willingness to be vulnerable. And in your video, you very kindly or generously share that you were seeking something, and you were seeking a need to feel worthy.
Right.
Which is a core seeking, I believe, for many human beings in some form or another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I enough?
100%.
Am I worthy? Am I good enough? Do you love me? All those. And here you are going from one branch to the other, hoping perhaps that this branch or this experience is going to solve whatever occurs to be missing.
Right.
Now, you said something also which I thought was interesting, and you kind of corrected yourself about it. You said, I was seeking not necessarily the military, but combat.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
So I think when people think about the military who haven't been in the military, they mostly think of boot camp, right? They think of this highly regimented, highly uniformed, no individuality, everybody lockstep, nobody has any, free thought at all. And, kind of like mindless robots or automatons or whatever else. And it's not like that at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. But I was at the same time, so I want to say it's not like that, but also I wasn't necessarily looking for a regimented lifestyle. I wasn't looking for people telling me what to do. I wasn't looking for all those things. I was looking for this expression or this opportunity of expression that only exists in certain levels. And combat is one of those levels. It's a test for the self. It is one of the greatest tests for the self, I believe.
And what do you mean? Can you define an example of expression
in terms of what about combat drew me?
What did you want to get to do in combat, or what did you get to do that combat provided you the ability to do?
Well, I think a couple things. One, it is sort of, I don't want to say it's this test of am I worthy, but at the time it seemed like that. It seemed like if I go to combat, then I will finally feel worthy, or I'll find myself worthy, because I will have done it. I will have achieved, this thing that I had in my mind, whatever that was.
Right. Somehow that hole that you were trying to fill would suddenly be filled.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Did it get filled?
Part of it did. I would say that part of it definitely did, because there are questions that, for me, the way I grew up, and we all ask ourselves certain questions, and a lot of them relate to our worth. A lot of them relate to our value, what we're capable of, things like that. And so some of the questions I asked myself were about my courage, were about my skill. Will I freeze up? Is this what will happen in these circumstances? Because everybody always says, well, you never know what's going to happen. That might be partially true, but I also think there are ways you can prepare, mentally prepare, and things like that. It's like in an audition, the more prepared you are going into an audition, the more confident you're going to be. That's obvious.
Sure.
But
yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and yet my brain cannot compare preparing for an audition to preparing to execute a mission in Afghanistan against the Taliban. No matter how prepared I am, I'm going to be shitting my pants. I don't care.
Well, see, and that's one of the things, is that when I started sort of peeling apart fear, because that's, one of the things that we had talked about, when I started coaching and taking coaching classes and go, okay, why can I rush into enemy fire? Not necessarily rush into enemy fire, but why can I perform when people are shooting at me?
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, if I want to talk to a woman I'm attracted to, or if I want to go into an audition, or if I want to do these things where the consequences for failure are so much smaller.
Right.
Why do I still feel fear, or not even feel fear, but why does the fear seem more paralytic or more overwhelming in some circumstances when the consequences aren't nearly as grave or as dire?
And what did you learn?
That there is no universal cure for fear. Fear is a part of our system. Like fear is supposed to be there, just like guilt and shame and happiness. And they're all supposed to be there because they all play a role. They can all get, out of whack. But so fear is just information, right? It's information with a caffeine kick.
And I think what I hear you also saying is that fear can be used as a tool, right? Or it can be something that paralyzes you. It's just a question of how you identify it or how you perceive it. And if you experience fear as having you, then you're right.
One, how you identify it and perceive it, but two, and how you prepare for it, but two, also the idea of competing values. So in combat, I had my values set. My values were my teammates. My values were my mission. I had these things that were important to me. So fear being this noise that occurs, there were louder noises going on. So fear was still present, but it wasn't a decision maker aside from, being foolhardy, right? You're not going to be fearless because obviously if people are shooting at you, you're not going to run out from behind cover and, do the Macarena in front of them.
No,
right?
That'd be bad.
Right.
But I hear you saying it's somehow you prioritize what's important.
Right. So, but if a friend of yours gets shot, then you might run out from behind cover to grab that person and drag them to safety.
Right.
Right. And it was, it's sort of like what we spoke about at the commercial was that, one of the tests I always used to do with my clients was if there was a 6-lane highway and traffic was flowing and I offered you $10 to run to the other side of the highway, would you?
No.
Okay. What about $10,000?
No.
$100,000.
I start to consider.
Right. $5 million.
More likely, depending on how much traffic we're talking about.
Okay.
But I'm starting to consider it.
Right. And now what if there were a 3-year-old child on the other side starting to walk out into traffic?
Completely. Of course. No, I know.
Okay.
I mean, the priority becomes life.
Right. And all of a sudden, the fear that was like the consequences have not changed, right? Or your personal consequences have not changed.
No, exactly. I'd like to say, like you said, you never know how you're going to perform until you're there. And it sounds like you were seeking that experience of how am I really going to perform? And when I do show up that way, will I perform the way I believe I'd like to perform? Now, I'd like to believe I would run blindly to save that child's life. I really would. But I don't know when it comes down to it. I'd like to believe I would,
Well, and that's the thing. So that's one of the things is that if it's not that child, then if we will find a competing value, we will most likely find a competing value that you do. So, if it were somebody that you knew, if it were, we increase the stakes to the point where whatever the consequences are for you are irrelevant. Right. And so when we talk about something as simple as, talking to a person we're attracted to or asking for a raise or, doing these things that so many people are afraid of doing, a lot of times it's because they haven't identified the competing value. They haven't what is like if I ask for a raise, if I'm at a job and I ask for a raise, what are the things that I will get from this raise? A better quality of life for me and my family, all these things. And then if we make those our primary focus, then asking for the raise doesn't feel like such a big deal.
I get you. Okay. So that's great though. That's very tangible coaching, something that someone can say, okay, I see that. I understand that now. If I do X, Y, Z, I will get that. I mean, you have to put it into action, but that's great. So if it says, if someone who's likely listening right now, most of the people who are listening right now are probably not people who are concerned about whether or not they're going to have to defend their teammate in heavy fire in Iraq.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So most of us are concerned about what you're saying, the practical issues of how am I going to ask for a raise? How am I going to ask for a promotion? How am I going to get that girl to fall in love with me or that guy to go out on a date with me? Whatever it is. So it's how to prioritize and actually get present to for yourself. Really look at what is it that I'm committed to
Right.
Identify what you're committed to. Because I think most of us oftentimes just kind of want something, but really haven't identified it. Haven't really
Absolutely.
defined it. And that in of itself leaves the universe wondering, I don't know what to do with you.
Right. Absolutely.
It's like, 100%. I kind of think about it like when I go to a restaurant and I'm going to order myself a hamburger, right? I make that order specific. I want that bun crispy. I want there to be bacon. I want the cheese to be gently melted. I want it medium well. I want my fries crispy. Humans oftentimes are more specific about the way they want their burger prepared than the way they want their life to unfold. And then they wonder why their life unfolds in a messy way.
Right. In this haphazard. Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
Like an accident.
But we've all had a bad burger. So we know what we want and what we don't want. A lot of times when it comes to like a new experience in life, we're not really sure. And the other thing is, I think people aren't generally, I'll take that back. Some people are afraid to ask for
what they want,
a burger the way they want it.
Right.
Right. Some people are. Most people are not, I would say, afraid to ask. A lot of us, though, are afraid to ask for what we want out of life because we will feel like unworthy. We might feel selfish. Like we might feel embarrassed. We might really, whatever.
We just don't even know.
Right.
Some people just don't know. I mean, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an actor. I just knew it. There was no question about it. I have no idea how I was going to do it. I just knew it. And I talked to people who went through high school, went through college, who didn't know what they wanted to do. Who didn't have a goal. And I always found
that was always me. Yeah.
I always felt like, oh man, that must suck. That must suck to not have a goal. And, you actually said something in one of your books that I thought was great. And this is, this kind of comes down to around managing fear, managing anxiety, managing the unfolding of our lives, but the power of intention, right? This is what we're talking about, right? Is the power of purpose and identifying your purpose. And the way you actually coined it was you said a definite chief aim.
Right. And that actually doesn't come from me. A definite chief aim comes from Napoleon Hill.
Okay.
And it's interesting because like if you go back and look at Bruce Lee, like Bruce Lee used it, he had one written out, like he knew where he was going.
Oh no. And I think there's something incredibly powerful about doing that exercise. And if you find yourself stuck or unsure, really dream, but then articulate it and write it down, make it concrete and give up the how. I think most of us get in our own way when setting off on a journey or on an adventure, on a goal, is the concern of how am I going to do this or how's it going to work or I don't know if it's going to, and then we just don't do anything. So fuck that. I mean, seriously, you can worry about the how eventually, trust me, but start with just getting clear about what your goal is. And then from there, I find the exercise, at least what I've done, is to actually put yourself into that reality. Like sit down, quiet yourself, write out what you're going to write out and get specific about it. And then actually just kind of daydream on it. Like daydream sounds light. I would even say really time travel, put yourself there, be that successful XYZ, making blah, 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 living with so-and-so, having this many kids, whatever it is, and let yourself be there and feel the circumstances of what that is. I'm willing to put money on it because I've experienced this myself, and I think you probably have as well. You start to do that exercise on a regular basis and train yourself like that, the how presents itself.
Right.
You have to trust that, though.
Yeah. And I think that, and when you dream, it's like you say, you have to dream and you have to dream without reservation and you have to dream unapologetically because I feel like so much of what holds us back in the world is our reluctance to want
dream
for
big?
ourselves.
To dream big?
Yeah. To think big for us, to want for ourselves, there's this inherent sort of, don't be don't be selfish, don't be this, don't be that. And this isn't about being selfish. This is about wanting for you. You can want for everybody else. One of the things I wrote something a long time ago, which unfortunately is gone, but it was an essay on being special. And I used to tell clients, you're not special. You're not special with a capital S. Like the universe has not picked you out to dump upon. Like anything that you believe other people are worthy of and deserve, so are you. And until you accept that, you're just being narcissistic and thinking you're special.
Yeah.
So if you think that everybody else deserves success, deserves happiness, deserves riches, if you think everybody else deserves that, and you don't take that for yourself, then you are actually holding yourself above everybody else, like better than everybody else.
Right. It always brings up for me that quote, the Marianne Williamson, our deepest fear quote, you know what I'm talking about. It's that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? It's that struggle that we have in us to play small. Because, right. God forbid we look too big and people are going to judge us. And, you actually mentioned something else in one of your books, and I love the conversation, just the thought exercise in and of itself. And it's specifically about the fight or flight mechanism in our brain. And I say mind because it's distinct from brain, right? In our brain, right. The amygdala, the fight or flight, the reptilian brain in us that is designed to protect us, more or less,
to
right?
Keep us alive.
Fear is there to help us. It says, hey, man, I would not run out into that traffic because there's a lot of cars and you're likely to get killed, right? I mean, so it's like the fear says, bad idea. You heed that, you survive. However, that reptilian brain, that amygdala is designed to, first of all, pull from the past, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also there from centuries of our DNA, centuries back, and it was really, really helpful for us because when you were running from a saber-toothed tiger, it was really good to keep running. There was something about the life that we lived as humans centuries and centuries ago that the amygdala really, really was helpful. It was that better safe than sorry. It's that let's prepare for the worst case scenario just to be safe.
Right.
Right. But I mean, if you think about it though, if that's what we're doing unconsciously, is that we're actually preparing for the worst. Most human beings are actually preparing for the worst. And kind of what we're talking about right now, it's when you were aiming big, our reptilian brain kicks in and goes, that's not going to happen. Good luck with that. You're going to fall fat on your fucking face. Everyone's going to make fun of you. You're never going to succeed. I mean, that's part of the fear kicking in to preserve you in some way. Right. At least that's what the brain thinks it's doing, right?
It's protecting us. I mean, in its own way.
Right.
And so and one of the things that, we kind of briefly talked about, was that, no part of us, no part of our system, our emotions, none of it is an enemy. Our amygdala, like our fear response, it's not an enemy. It really is not trying to ruin our lives or every part of us is trying to protect us. And so sometimes I think we have a tendency to be very hard on ourselves, and we get into those modes of thinking like the heavy criticism and the internal judgment, and it just goes out, further and further. We think, we have a thought, I want to be wealthy. And then another thought goes, don't think that, you'll never make any money, just stick to what you're doing. And then another thought that outside of that, that's like, I shouldn't be so judgmental. I deserve things. And, and it never stops.
Right.
It feels like it never stops. Right.
It does not.
And so I think I always try to create sort of like this ultimate sort of consciousness or process at the very edge of all those conversations. This like a benevolent and understanding great grandparent that has seen it all, loves it all, approves of it all, and just kind of looks looks across every one of those conversations and goes, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah.
And just to kind of breathe and be okay with when I do, like, when that conversation or those judgments or those thoughts, insecurities, doubts, whatever pop up, instead of like doing battle with them, we can just go, okay, there those are. And while they're not
there, those are. That's so great though. What you just said, there those are. It's being able to step back and witness it rather than be consumed by it.
Right.
And that's the dance. And I mean, you've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time, and I still am trying to work it out. I mean, I would not say I am a master. I am working on being a master, right? That's the intention. You got to,
right.
But it's practice. And I catch myself all the time suddenly sitting up at midnight watching some television show I'm not really paying attention to, worried or concerned about something I don't need to be worrying or concerned about, and then literally stopping myself.
Right.
And saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What
right.
What are you doing, buddy? All is well, man. You've got a great life. Things are great. And that's what's so strange about it. I've had plenty of time in my life where my circumstances did not occur great, right? However,
right.
my circumstances are pretty fucking great, right? I mean, when you really, really look at all of it, I think that anybody, no matter what situation you're in, now, again, I'm sure there's plenty of circumstances that people would go to task with me on where circumstances legitimately suck. But I think that in our first world issues, here, most of us can probably look at our day and really find a healthy list of things to be grateful for. And oftentimes in just stopping and just surrendering, relaxing, breathing is half the battle. You just got to literally interrupt that conversation that is limiting your freedom and serenity.
Completely. I think that a lot of modern self-help teaches this very sort of adversarial approach to like those thoughts, like, oh no, you are worthy. So when we have these thoughts, we try to combat them. We go, no, I am worthy. I am good. I am. And I think that, like, anytime you meet, I'm this is kind of warfare. Anytime two forces collide,
right,
or two forces, meet, there's going to be a collision, as opposed to like asymmetrical warfare, right? Which is, kind of taking something from the side when the forces are uneven or whatever, when it's more like guerrilla warfare. So for me, when the doubts or insecurities and things like that come up, it's not a matter of doing battle with them. It's not a matter of convincing myself that I'm worthy or that I deserve something or that I'm going to do great at this audition or anything else. Mm-hmm. It's just like going, okay, yeah, I see you. Like, and again, just go back to it. There you are. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I know why you're there.
Totally. And that's just what I do sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm not alone. Every human on the planet does that, which connects me to everybody.
That's right. And, I've always loved this is all gets kind of cliche, especially in the coaching world, in the AA world, these cliches we all throw around. But, it's like whatever resists persists. Whatever you resist persists. And it's that, like you said, if you push back on it, it pushes back equally. And
right.
You kind of have to, I heard somebody else say, you can hold on to something two different ways. You can hold your hand out and, like, imagine you have a ball in your hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can hold the ball in your hand with an open palm. You can also hold the ball in your hand so you don't drop it with a clenched fist.
Mm-hmm.
There's two ways to hold on to something. One is creating more force, more intensity, more anxiety, more resistance, and the other one is simply allowing it.
Right.
Just letting it be. And it's such a tough lesson, I think, for us to learn because we're so prone to fixing it. Like, there's something wrong here. When I feel that way, there's something wrong.
Right.
And I got to fix it. I feel bad. I feel angry. I have anxiety. Great. You know what? You feel bad. You have anxiety. It's going to pass. if you stop focusing on it.
Right. Right. And
you obsess on it, it's gonna stick around if you obsess on it. I guarantee it.
Right. And that's where service, we talked about service a little bit. That's where service really comes into it. Whether it's serving other human beings or a cause or something, is that when there is something out there that is greater than you in your mind, not greater than you in worth, but just, a purpose, like,
Totally.
You're in service to something, all of a sudden, like, so many of the things that were bothersome or troublesome or kind of were self-centered or whatever, they become irrelevant. And once they become irrelevant, they lose their power.
Yeah.
They
really do. They really do. And it just kind of comes back to the whole idea of what we choose to focus on. What's your goal? Are you focusing on it? Are you focusing on the fear that your goal won't succeed? Or are you focusing on the possibility of what your goal will manifest? And we have a choice. We just have a choice. And at the end of the day, oftentimes we forget that we have a choice every single moment. Because what ends up happening, and another quote I love is, thoughts, when emotionalized, become magnetized and attract similar and like thoughts. And I love it because it eloquently says kind of what we're talking about. If you think that you're not going to succeed, you will start to think about why you're not going to succeed. Oh, well, because I don't have the time, or because I've never done this, or I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't even go to school. I didn't go to school. I must be a fucking idiot. I might be a fucking loser the rest of my life. Literally, you will go down that path unconsciously because the emotion has attached itself to the thought to such a degree that it starts to attract other thoughts like it.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that's the case, and I think we all have experienced it, I know I have, you go down a real dark street in a real dangerous neighborhood in your mind, we've all done it. We do it unconsciously all the time. You'll be driving down the freeway and suddenly you've gone past your exit 3 times, right? And didn't even realize why. It's because you were off on some tangent about why your life wasn't working out, or, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just based on this example itself.
Or a conversation that you have not had with somebody yet, but you think you're going to, and every time you have it in your head, it gets worse and worse.
Right, exactly. So if that's happening unconsciously, and this is kind of what I was realizing when this came up for me, and this idea came up for me as a concept to consider. It's really just that. It's like, hey, consider this. I'm not saying this is the law. I'm saying, has this ever happened for you? Have you ever experienced this happening for you? And when I can identify myself as then I want to drill down on that. I want to explore that. So if that's what I can do and have done in a negative, limiting fashion, what if I did it in a positive, empowering fashion? What would happen then?
Right.
What if I focused my ideas in a way that turned me on, lit me up, got me excited? The opposite would manifest itself, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah.
So give it a shot.
and even for anybody who is listening and may not believe in manifesting or anything else like that, what about your quality of life? During the journey, you know what I mean? Like having dismal thoughts, or these thoughts, or living as you're talking about, like bolstering, having these ideas, like your quality of life along your journey. That's part of it too.
Completely.
Does that make sense?
No, of course. No, of course. If we spend our lives dwelling in the fear, the anger, the resentment, the lack, the scarcity, the anxiety, if we live there, it negatively impacts us physiologically, psychologically.
Yeah.
It's all encompassing, and you can agree with me or not, but I'm telling you it's the truth based on fact. I'm not like telling you I think this. I'm like, like people on CNN might say, I don't think that global warming's an issue. I don't care what you think. It's like, I don't care if you feel global warming is an issue. There's a fact. And the fact is, if you dwell in anger and resentment and fear, you're going to get sick. You are sick.
And you're just, why, like, we are all given a limited amount of time on this earth. None of us know how long it's going to be.
That's right.
Why choose? Because we that's basically what it is.
I don't think many people even realize they have a choice. I don't think people realize they have a choice. They think, they literally will tell you, I don't know how to do anything else. It's all they know.
Right.
And I get that. I've been there. So I really do get it.
Look, I get it too. Like I have definitely been through, dark periods and whatnot. And a lot of times, like I know when I'm in that and I'm like, okay, like I feel what I'm going through right now and it's okay. Like it's not going to last forever. I need to get moving. I need to get to the gym. I need to go for a walk. You got
to change your state. You got to change your direction.
Exactly.
Literally. I remember specifically, gosh, I want to say probably, let's say 7 years ago, I was going through, a very, very dark period. I did not realize, or let's just say I wasn't willing to realize, that I was grappling with depression. Now, it didn't help that I was drinking every day. Right. That didn't help. So whether it was you're a drinker and you're a drunk, therefore you're depressed, or you're depressed and you're exacerbating it by your drinking, dummy. Either way around it, I was fucking miserable. And I had done years of personal training and coaching and, done a lot of the stuff we talked about, right? I'd seen the other side. I'd seen the light, if you will, right? And I had just gone down a very, very, very dark path. And the disease of alcoholism is a nasty disease. That's not what we're here to talk about. But nonetheless, I remember being in that very dark place. And I remember my mom calling me and basically gently and lovingly saying, I don't know who I'm talking to on the phone right now. And it hit me so deeply that she didn't recognize the man she was talking to, as somehow I had my true self, myself that was loving and generous and kind and full of life, had left the building.
Right.
And it rocked me. Now, I didn't turn around and about face the next day and whistle zippity doo out of my ass. I had to look at that and say, first of all, Jordan, it's time to remove your head from your ass, right? Great. Now what? What do I do? And like you said, you have to take some sort of contrary action and it didn't, and I didn't get sober the next day.
Right.
But I took an action. I picked up the phone and I called someone and I said, how can I be of service? I knew an environment that I could go to where I could volunteer and be in an environment that I knew was empowering, whether I was empowering or not, whether or not I was feeling empowering. I knew that this environment, that I could bathe in it and it would potentially heal me as long as I participated in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was that, as I had to take a contrary action. And it took a couple of years.
Well, I think, that's one of the things we forget sometimes. And again, this comes down to this this loving kindness towards ourselves that, for a lot of the ways we think, the ways we behave, a lot of times, we didn't develop these overnight. It took a while. That's right. and for them to solidify or for them to, do whatever. And so we can be patient with ourselves. And as long as we are taking steps to, as you say, do things in the contrary, to sort of break out of these old patterns and it may, it may not always feel as though we're progressing, but doing something new, adding new information to that cycle, adding new, stimuli, anything like that, will start to expand our experience. Will start to expand our patterns, and it'll all work, eventually, as like I said. But we have to be like loving and patient with ourselves. We have to treat ourselves as well as we would treat a good friend of ours. And like, hey, I know what you're going through right now.
Totally. And I like to remind myself, and I said this to people as well, is when you think about or realize how rough we can be on ourselves with our own self-talk, and you say like, imagine you're talking to your best friend. I've actually said, how would you talk to your child?
Yeah.
Would you badger your child? Would you make your child feel like shit? Of course not. So imagine how you would talk to your child. So, and talk to yourself like that. Consider talking to yourself like that. Now, again, it is self-love, but I also believe it's persistence. There is a commitment, I believe, to the practice of mindfulness, self-love, whatever this is, whatever we're talking about here, being kind to ourselves, generating serenity, whatever the heck this all is, it is up to us, and we do have to participate, in it.
100%. I think that there's a lot of benefit to, especially in our current society, there is a lot of benefit to being miserable and being hard on ourselves. It's secondary gain, like it doesn't feel good, but there are there's a certain sense of security and like if things are good in your life, then there's always the possibility that something will happen and go wrong, right?
Totally.
But if things are always bad for us, then hey, what do we really have to worry about?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, a lot of people have made huge careers out of being angry, miserable people. You look at like a lot of comedians have made huge careers out of being angry, rageful people. So you can channel that. I'm not saying you should. There's certain people who can really utilize that anger and that rage. I would hope that they can release that. I mean, I remember when I started doing some of this work, there was this concern that if I started cleaning house, I was going to lose who I was.
Right.
Which it's like, so like you're saying, I want to hang on to that stuff. I want to hang on to that rage. I want to hang on to that misery. No, I'm good. I don't need it. So what I want to do, 'cause you and I, obviously, there's so many things about what we are talking about that you and I could continue on multiple tangents, but I did want to remember that, this is a breakthrough conversation. And if, as we are discussing and as we are talking, what kind of breakthrough would you say you've had in your life? Something that really transformed who you were and to who you are. I also do want to talk about the other book. And I mean, I want to talk about your experience specifically in the military because it's so foreign to me and strangely fascinating to me. I don't know what it is about my fascination with military or people in the military or watching documentaries on Vietnam or World War I or Restrepo, the guys in Iraq. I mean, I don't know or Afghanistan, I don't know what my fascination is with it, but I have it. Sure. And it's so foreign to me, the idea of saying, okay, I'm going to consciously choose to go to a 10, 12, 14, 16 week boot camp. I don't know the numbers. Sorry. I know that they're long and they're intense. I'm going to choose to do that. And then I'm going to continue to train to be a soldier / killer, ultimately, peacekeeper, however you want to put it, right? And then voluntarily respond to the order to go to war and how to face then picking up a rifle, loading it, looking through a sight, getting a bead on someone and pulling the trigger. It's foreign to me, but fascinating.
Right.
How do you compartmentalize? How do you rationalize? Is it, there's just evil there. There's bad guys there and I got to take care of it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, a sociopath in the sense that, I couldn't be a contract killer and just go out and just randomly kill people. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
there was always a sense of
duty,
but right and wrong.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Like when you talk
code.
about the Taliban, you were talking about guys who were boarding up a school full of girls.
Yeah.
And burning it down. Like I told you, a little bit about my childhood and growing up with sort of the whole bully thing and stuff. And like, there's a real sense of these people just don't need to exist on this planet anymore. If you believe in reincarnation, then great. They'll get another go at it, to try and do it better. Right.
Right.
It's like
you're just going to get them back in line faster.
Right. We're going to push the reset button, try it again. And, and there's definitely a sense of compassion there, in the sense of this is the world that these people grew up in. When you look at like the tribal lands of Afghanistan, the Pashtuns and, the tribal warfare that's exist there forever, and the blood feuds, it's like the Hatfield and the Coy, like every day for them. And it always has been.
How did you guys, I mean, this war has been going on and 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 on, right? I mean, it's insane. And yet we have, whether it's a sense of duty or moral code or ego or arrogance on our part, to say that we're going to go in the US of A and we're going to transform through this tact centuries of tribal warfare.
Yeah, it is honestly all of that. It's ego, it's ignorance, it is duty. It is, to me, it's like misplaced duty. I am definitely not, politically like an expansionist or an interventionist or there are a lot of places in the world that they're not down for democracy. They're not ready for democracy. Like they like their system. And it's very difficult, for Americans to see these things that are going on in the world, especially, these things are going on everywhere, not everywhere, but a lot of places all the time.
Right.
But it's only when the news starts to focus on it that, it comes to our awareness.
That's right.
So who knows when and why,
especially when it impacts an actual U.S. citizen.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, we suddenly stand up and take notice. However, I think we're all aware of the fact that we don't take kindly to, like you said, bullies. I mean, these are bullies times 10. The idea of locking up little girls in a building and burning the place down, that needs to be answered to. Unfortunately, we are kind of the hall monitor. It ends up being, unfortunately, and there's this kind of conversation of whether or not violence is the answer. Is it the only answer? And I don't know.
It's not. I don't believe. Again, sort of as, it probably sounds like paradoxical, I guess, but, as sort of a Buddhist, I don't believe that violence is the only answer, but violence is definitely part of the answer. Sometimes, there is a type of person in the world that won't respond to anything else.
Yeah.
And they don't. And a lot of times they're in situations or in positions where they don't need to respond to anything else. Right. They're set up. You could have done, embargoes or whatever you wanted to the Taliban all day long, and it wouldn't matter to them. So, and again, I am not like, I believe that the invasion of Iraq was a mistake. I think that we removed even though Saddam Hussein was a horrible human being and his sons were horrible human beings, they were still a stabilizing force in that area, right. Sort of like Tito it was in Yugoslavia. Like it's the world's a very complicated place, and it's like an
ecosystem.
It is. And it's very difficult to say, okay. And when you talk about an ecosystem and you talk about an apex predator, and unfortunately apex predators are just running on instinct, where these people are running off of like malice and everything else. But if you remove that apex predator from the ecosystem, then what happens to that ecosystem? So that's not a really good.
But what ends up happening is the system abhors a vacuum.
Right.
So it's going to fill the vacuum.
Right.
That's what happened with the Taliban.
And it happened in Iraq. Yeah. And the problem is that the United States, we are not savvy people when it comes to the world. Like, we are very naive. We're very spoiled. I mean, we've grown up with pretty much, everything handed to us, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the thing is that our politicians, and it doesn't matter if they're left or right, none of that matters. Like, our politicians don't understand when they get elected to office, they're in office for however long. When they're dealing with politicians from a lot of these developing nations or whatever else, these politicians, they don't know if they're going to be in power the next day. They don't know if there's going to be a coup. They don't know. So we don't have the frame of reference to deal with these people, understand that they're just grabbing for power. Like, when we send them financial aid, the vast majority of that financial aid is going into their bank accounts because they don't know where they're going to be 2 days from now.
Right.
So we get it wrong a lot, and it doesn't make us horrible people. It just, we have all this power, and thank goodness, because while the United States definitely makes mistakes, we are the people of our country. There is no United States. It's just a group of people, and a group of people with a constitution and the ideas of liberty and freedom and these things. And you give the amount of power the United States has to almost any other country in the world.
Sure.
And the situation, it would not be the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I was listening to Sam Harris talking to a Navy SEAL. And we talking about a lot of this stuff. And it's any country, any government, any regime, hopefully at the core of it, wants peace. We want to get along. We want to just do things the way we want to do them. We don't want to be in conflict.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, we're hopefully, I'm sure there are plenty of evil SOBs in our government with way too much power, obviously,
sure, absolutely.
Right? But I'd like to believe, and maybe this is Pollyanna of me, I'd like to believe that ultimately this idea of liberty, freedom is what our intention is for everybody. And it's unfortunately what we end up sticking our nose into things that we shouldn't stick our nose into sometimes. I mean, I'm, again, probably very Pollyanna of me because I'm, where I grew up and how I grew up. And, I have no context for the kind of horror that a lot of other countries and the people who live there have gone through. But let's change tact a little bit. I do want to kind of get into what, if you can share breakthroughs that you've had, breakthroughs where you were like, oh my God, if that had not happened, I don't know where I'd be, or if that choice had not been made, I don't, does anything since we talked come up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share one of the things that I know was a major breakthrough for me, but I don't know if this is relevant. So I'll share it with you. And,
I mean, I don't think there's a definition of relevant as far as I'm concerned for a breakthrough. As far as I'm concerned, if it's something that transformed your life, period.
Yeah. So one of the biggest was when I was probably 18 or 19. And, and I told you my dad is a recovering alcoholic. He's been recovering since I was 18. And growing up, there were challenges. And one of my responses to that as a young child, I think, was to become just very introspective and also very alert. But I developed sort of a messiah complex. I don't know where it came from. Whatever. But I developed a messiah complex, and I thought that it was on me to save the world. And I had a really hard time getting along with people, not getting along in a sense of like friendliness, but understanding why like dudes would punch each other, play grab ass, call each other names, whatever, they were alien to me. I kind of obnoxiously had a stick up my ass, I think, right. Just really like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But from this sort of pseudo spiritual place, and there were times when I would go to AA meetings with my dad. There were times when I would go to adult children meetings, and I hated them. I just hated them. I hated listening to people complain about their parents or talk about their parents. The adults. I don't. I just had a very narrow view of the world. And I think that I was pretty judgmental too. I mean, I'm sure I was very judgmental. Actually.
You were a teenager.
Yeah, I was a teenager.
Right. Okay.
I was a teenager, but I wasn't like a fun teenager. I was just like I wasn't like a troublemaker teenager. I was
were you the tattletale room monitor?
No, I wasn't. I was like above it all, in my mind.
Yeah. Above it all.
I
sure.
was above it all.
Better than.
And I would never get angry. And if I did get angry, and if a person asked me if I was angry, I would say no, and I would be mad at myself for them. I'd be mad that I was even, because I was supposed to be above anger. Wow. And again, because my dad was very angry, so I didn't get angry. I was above anger. And again, like I said, it all came from this very like pseudo spiritual place. And
interesting when the ego uses something like spiritual development as a crutch almost.
I would honestly say that spiritual development, especially the way it's done in the United States, is one of the biggest drivers of ego.
Yeah,
there is.
One day's breakthrough is another day's ego trip.
Oh my goodness!
Right?
Oh, yeah.
You suddenly think like, "Oh, I got this all figured out. Look at me." And I actually say that often on this podcast because suddenly I'll go off on a tangent and you'll catch me monologuing about transformation and the breakthroughs I've had. And I'm like, dude, you sound like an asshole, and it's like, that's my judgment of it, obviously, because I've gotten a great deal of benefit from what I'm actually talking about. But my mind starts to jump in and go, who do you think you are? Get off your high horse. Right. So it's a very tricky tightrope walk between surrendering the ego and actually finding some sort of experience with enlightenment or transformation or whatever. Anyway, sorry. I interrupted
especially
you.
when we're in the community, because once we reach once we gain any like insight, boy, we want do we want to grab hold of that and lord it over people? I mean, it's just
totally.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like clearly you don't understand what I understand.
Yeah, it's there was a Buddhist monk who was talking about getting rid of all of his clothes and all of his worldly possessions so that he had no more ego, and all he got was like this rough hewn robe, and then after a while of wearing this robe, he was looking at it, he goes, oh, how fine the weave, so much better than my neighbors, and it's like, right. Exactly,
right.
So anyway, I was like wrestling with some stuff, and so I went to an AA meeting, and at the time I didn't even drink. Like, I didn't drink until I was 23 because I refused to be like my dad.
That's right.
So, but it was really, really odd. But anyway, so I was at this AA meeting, and people were talking, and I was just getting angrier and angrier about this guy was talking about, the guy was probably in his 30s or 40s. I don't know. And I don't know why I would get so angry about this, like just allowing people to have their space and their thing. But anyway, there was this little brown trash can, just like an office trash can, a little brown rubber triangle or square, whatever trash can up front. And I looked at this trash can, and all of a sudden, like, I just realized, like, I'll tell you, but it came as a realization. So it all came at once, that I realized that we all have this space inside of us for the divine, right? Whatever that is. And when and I could put the reason this trash can just triggered me, because I realized, like, I could worship this trash can. I could make that trash can my God.
That's right.
And I might even be able to impart some sort of power on that trash can. I don't know, but I could worship that trash can. But the problem is, if I worship that trash can, I'll be limited. That the trash can will have very limited abilities, right? I'm putting something in that spot for the divine that is very limited. And as this guy was talking, I realized that as children, we put our parents in that spot for the divine.
Yeah.
Right. And then through, whatever rituals or whatever we go through religions or not really, whatever. But there comes a point in time when we switch that out, when we put something else there, and I think that, a lot of different religions, a lot of different, sort of older rituals, things, the sort of the passing into adulthood, whatever. But those are meant to say, okay, this is your God now. This is your divine now. This is your purpose now. However a society defines it, right?
Yeah.
But because, especially in America, we've lost so much tradition. We don't have any rites of passage, unless somebody is a part of a religion, which I really wasn't part of a religion or whatever. They don't go through communication or what, I'm not sure all the different things, but they don't.
If you're Catholic, you go through communion and confirmation, right. And if you're Jewish, you're going to have your bat mitzvah, your bar mitzvah. Right. You're going to, but if you're in an organized religion, there are those rites of passage. You did not have those. Right.
And then also in a lot of like tribal societies, there are those rites, but so anyway, so what I realized with this guy is that he never took his parents out. Like he never gave, his parents aren't people. His parents aren't capable or so they're not supposed to be flawed because they're gods.
Right.
They're divine. And so that's why it tears him down so much, right? Is because he's never taken them out and given them the permission just to be sovereign human beings and to be human and to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So everything is taken personally because his gods are failing him.
Yeah.
Right. And so while I was realizing that, because I like I said, I was very uptight. Like I was a perfectionist with everything I did. And I was like, get so down on myself about stuff because I was supposed to be better than that. And I just realized that my imperfection was perfect. My imperfection was part of this perfect weave. And all of a sudden I just felt like all this pressure that I've been carrying around, I mean, my whole life, like it just evolved. It just evaporated.
Right.
And like my imperfection was okay. That my imperfection was all part of a greater perfection, a greater, idea.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of disappeared. I went into this sort of state of satori. I mean, and for 3 days, I walked around and I was just like humored, by things, even when it was bittersweet. And I sort of had this realization that floods, famine, it was all okay in this sort of infinite weave of things. It all just was. And like around the second day, I think one of my friends in the military, he came up to me and he goes, "What happened to you?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Something happened." He goes, "I want what you have."
Wow.
And I just smiled at him and I said, "I can't give it to you." I said, "But it'll be okay." Because I knew it would, like no matter what, it would be okay. And so he kind of got a little teary and he walked off. And so then the last day, like the third day, I was standing up. I remember this is a Balboa Hospital, Naval Hospital, San Diego. And I was standing up on this kind of hill where the hospital was and overlooking like this kind of empty field at the time. And I thought, okay, like I know where I'm at right now in the sense that I can take this step and be gone. Like I can open, like this door is open and I can be gone. I'll still be here. It's not, but nothing will really matter anymore. Nothing will really be important. I won't, it'll just be, it'll be great. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. It'll be this sense of peace. And then there was this, other part of my brain is like, why would I do that? Like, I've never even had a chance to be human. I've denied myself, I've been so uptight. I've denied myself the opportunity to really just live, to just be. This is like a cheat code. It's like a shortcut. Like this isn't where I want to go yet. Like I want to live fully. I want to, I want to get married. Like I want to do these things. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of took a step back from that, and I had like this sort of afterglow for a couple of days. But that feeling, like the residual was there, and the memory of it, and the idea that it's there. But then I just kind of came back and I was just like so much more okay with myself, with other people, with the world in general, just like more okay with me, you know?
Pardon me. Yeah, dude, really powerful. I completely hear what you're saying, actually. I identify with what you shared. I've had a similar experience myself, and there is something to be said about not knowing, first of all, when that kind of breakthrough is going to present itself. Being okay with trusting that the breakthrough will present itself if we're doing the work, if we're being patient. You were taking action. You were participating at that point you were in an AA meeting, you were listening, you were grappling with something, right?
Right.
And something broke loose, something shook itself out, something revealed itself is maybe another way of putting it, right? Something revealed itself to you that wasn't present before. Right. Now, maybe I should even rephrase that. It was always present. You just weren't seeing it.
Right.
Right.
Well,
like,
yeah. I was
it's
totally
there.
closed off to it.
What's that?
Yeah. I was totally closed
off to it. Right. And somehow that veil got lifted and that, that shadow, that light got shined on this thing for you that granted you compassion or,
right.
or empathy or forgiveness or whatever the words are, generosity, kindness, self-love,
probably
all these things.
Compassion
right?
is definitely like the big one, I would say.
Yeah.
Compassion for myself, compassion for others, like compassion for the world in general.
Yeah. It's big. It's a
completely.
big one. It's a big one is to acknowledge that we're all in this together. We're all just stumbling through, working this thing out. And there really isn't a quote unquote answer. It's never done. We're never finished.
No.
So surrender to the fact that you're going to figure it all out. Like we're going to do the best we can. And at the end of the day, I would like to believe that if I can go to bed at night and honestly remind myself to be thankful, to be grateful, to know that I'm blessed, to know that I have a wonderful life and to give thanks for that every day, there's not a lot more I should be seeking. I mean, I know that sounds maybe too simple, but there's something to be said about just being grateful.
Right. Well, and I get what you're saying about there's nothing more we should be seeking, because I think there's a difference between how we live our life or the sort of the state we live our life in and what we do while we're alive. Right. So a lot of times those two are so interconnected in that what I'm doing, if I'm successful, will create the state that I'm in. Oh, I'm happy because I succeeded and I'm worthy because I succeeded. But that's not going to last very long because then we see something else that we really want or, whatever. And so it's always this idea of how long until my next happiness.
That's right.
Right. And then when we're happy, it's like, oh shit, like how long is this going to last? And which immediately pulls us out of it.
That's right.
Which is like, I ruined it. And so there's the idea of living a life of gratitude, a life of compassion, or doing our best. Of
course. And I'm not saying I'm going to go live on a mountain in Tibet. And I'm not suggesting anybody do that. If they want to, that's fantastic. I'm still going to live my life. I'm still going to seek to manifest what turns me on and what I'm passionate about creatively, spiritually, emotionally. I'm still going to seek those things out because I'm not going to stop desiring my life or the living of it or the sharing of it, but just the ability to find a way to create consciously a state of serenity is key to me, that seems to work for me. And again, it's a daily effing job.
Right. 100%. And I think the Stoics, they had the idea of eudaimonia, like this feeling of of well-being. They weren't really worried about happiness or sad. Like they didn't think that it was beneficial to pursue like emotional states, right? To I want to be happy, so I'm going to do the things that make me happy. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, there are a lot of really messed up things that can make us happy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like there's no moral superiority to being happy. And there are certain things that make us sad or make us feel down that are very much worthy of. Like if we love somebody deeply and then we lose that person and then we're sad for a period of time, like there's nothing wrong with that sadness.
Right.
There's so to try to avoid sadness, so I'm not going to love anybody my whole life so
Right.
that I never have to be sad.
Right.
So, just like you say, the serenity or this idea of well-being. And to me, there's the idea of confidence. And confidence isn't necessarily like I've studied confidence in depth, and because to me it's like part of the study of fear. And confidence isn't just I can do this, I can achieve, or if I go ask for a raise, I'm going to get it. There are like different forms of confidence, and it shows up in different ways. But I feel like the ultimate confidence is the confidence that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. Like no matter what happens,
That's right.
I will find my feet and the world will continue.
The world will continue to turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's literally oftentimes what we most fear and avoid only can sometimes be a fleeting experience. We worry about something happening, and then when it actually happens, it literally passes by us so quickly, it's almost pointless. But we spent so much time worrying about it possibly happening that I find happens in life more oftentimes than not. So as far as your, this kind of goes back. Pardon me, I'm changing gears again here, but as far as the book, The Killing Book, and talking about PTSD and talking about the different types of experiences that you've had and the coaching that you have written about as far as helping people with the varying degrees of the experience of killing. It's it's not a conversation that people like have over, cocktails. It's not a conversation you tend to have with people at all, and yet statistically, the amount of people in our world who you might know who've actually experienced killing, either consciously or, by duty, being an officer, a police officer or a soldier, or being somebody who is responsible for the ordering of killing. So a passive killing, right? Or an accidental killing. There's these varying degrees of a very traumatic experience that you've actually been able to dissect and help people to heal in. And it also obviously it has something to do with PTSD, which, you don't necessarily have to kill somebody to suffer from PTSD, but I'm sure PTSD can result as a result of having an experience with killing. How did you decide to focus your attention on that subject in that book?
So that book, counseling people who have killed other people, we call it the Kill Book, was a creation. It came of a series of workshops that my friend, Dr. Richard Nongard, who is a therapist, and I did. We worked together on projects before, but we recognized it started years ago, and we recognized that there was sort of a lack of people addressing this space, and part of it came through a conversation we were having, because we have very open conversations, and we're very close friends, and we were talking. His son had gone into the military, and so we were talking, and somehow it came up. He asked me one of the things that annoyed me about how people deal with veterans, or how people would talk to me, and I said, well, it never really, like, often people will ask, oh, so you're a veteran. Did you go to war? And yeah, I went to war. And then a lot of people will try to work up the nerve to say, because they want to know, did you ever kill anybody? That's what they want to know. Sure. Did you ever kill anybody? And I'm not shy about it. It's like, yes, I know I did, and a lot of times we don't. A lot of times you have to think that, like, in firefights and things like that, when they're going on, like, there's so much chaos, and you may be shooting at a guy and somebody else shooting at, like, you don't really know if you've killed, how many you've killed. Like, people don't, outside of maybe like a sniper who who knows his, an exact number of people. He's like, most people have no idea who have been in combat, have no idea how many people specifically they have killed. Right. So there's just too many variables. So, but anyway, so he asks, so people generally kind of, well, have you ever killed anybody? Yeah. And then the question, this is the question that always annoyed me because it's very presumptuous in my view, is how did you get over it? Right. And so I'm talking to Richard about this and he's like, well, why does that annoy you? And I said, because they're assuming that I have something to get over.
Yeah.
And they're
projecting
onto me their views of it. And in a way, they're judging me. They're judging me as somebody who at one time may have been broken and may still be broken because of this event.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like, how did you get over it? So one of the things is that for a lot of soldiers, especially a lot of soldiers in special operations, they don't have a problem with it. And again, they're not people like, we're not talking about, contract killers. We're not talking about them having, killed civilians or anything else. We're talking about force on force in our minds, good guys and bad guys,
right?
Two willing combatants, people, they've agreed, we've agreed. We're all out there willingly fighting for our cause or whatever. And so in that aspect, it's like, no, you're like, everything that was going on was consensual between all the parties involved. This contest of ideas and will and skill and luck, unfortunately. And so, no, there was nothing for me to get over. And that type of mentality, that type of attitude, especially when it comes from therapists who are generally very big-hearted people, very compassionate people. They have a lot of empathy. That's why they go into therapy, and they can't fathom the idea of going to war and taking a human life and not being affected by that.
Sure.
So in a way, what they're doing is they're pushing this idea of what you did was wrong. And if you don't feel bad about it, there's something wrong with you onto the person they're working with.
Yeah. No, I hear you. There's something to be said about them making you wrong for not responding or having the same experience that they would have.
Right.
And that because you don't have that experience, you must be wrong. You must be effed up in some way. You need to be healed. And honestly, I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, for me, the idea of taking someone else's life, no matter what, I feel like would impact me in a way that would be in a negative way. And I completely understand your point of view. I don't know if my mind would be able to process it that way.
Sure. And I get that. And, and like, I that's totally fair. Every
it's all
human
fair,
being is
and
different.
I totally get it. I mean, this is your perspective. This is how you process it. But it's interesting that it's what inspired you to help people who treat people who do need to help with their processing, how to do it. You're giving a doctor or a therapist a perspective that they don't have, right?
Right, because especially since Vietnam, I think, and the whole sort of myth of post-traumatic stress that came from that. And I'm not saying that post-traumatic stress is a myth. I'm just saying that it like this whole sort of like Hollywood idea, you know what I mean? Like it became something.
It became cliche.
With a tortured soldier snapping, like at the wrong, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can't believe it. And, like post-traumatic stress has been around and written about for ages.
Sure. And
it happens for a number of reasons. I mean, people can get post-traumatic stress for survivor's guilt, for, a bombardment, for like seeing a friend die, or for other things like civilian, like
getting into a car accident, getting into a car accident, you get PTSD.
Yeah. So taking a human life, it isn't any greater reason or cause to lead to post-traumatic stress than any of these other reasons.
Right.
And it's funny because like I was just talking to a friend of mine, 3 3 or 4 weeks ago, and she was telling me about having post-traumatic stress. And she goes, I feel really bad telling you about it because it's you. And you were a soldier and you were in combat. And I feel like I cheapen it and I'm like, don't. Post-traumatic stress, it's not, the military does not own the rights.
It's not synonymous with soldiering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. The military does not own the rights to post-traumatic stress.
Of course.
Combat is not the only trauma that has ever existed.
That's right.
On the face of the planet.
Right.
Like if it's post-traumatic, it's post-traumatic. That's all that matters.
It's just got such a big spotlight on it right now.
Sure.
I think people identify PTSD with soldiering because of the war that we've been in, and because of so many of us know soldiers who deal with it, and then how to treat it. Is it treatable? Is any of what these medicines getting in the way or even helping? I mean, it's a big conversation that's being had because the amount of time we've spent at war. Right? I mean, we are a warlike people.
Yeah, 100%. All people I think are warlike.
Yes,
I mean, I think that it's part of our nature. I mean, you look at like Buddhist Tibet and stuff, and I mean, they've certainly had their, like nobody's like not guilty,
of course.
But one of the things about like soldiers, I'll say, is their rates of suicide are astronomical.
Yeah.
For veterans. And for me, like when you look at post-traumatic stress within the veteran community and then post-traumatic stress like outside the veteran community, and why are the suicide rates so high? So I am not a scientist and I don't have numbers behind me. So a lot of this is just going off of my own personal experience and anecdotal evidence, or experience with other people. But I don't attribute a lot of the veteran suicide to strictly post-traumatic stress. I feel as though, while there's certainly a part of that, there's a real sense of isolation that happens with veterans. Like
So it's coupled with depression.
I believe so. Depression and isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I know depression can be part of post-traumatic stress. It's one of the symptoms.
Sure.
And then it's aggravated by, alcohol and drugs and things like that. But I really believe that there's this idea that when veterans, even veterans who haven't been to combat, because the lion's share of veterans either haven't been to combat or those who have, maybe 90% of them have not seen action, have not seen combat.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a very small percentage of veterans who have actually seen combat. But I believe that one of the things that happens is that when a veteran returns to the civilian world, I mean, that's really what it is. It's a new world. And,
it's kind of like, it kind of goes full circle back to, and again, I apologize for interrupting, but it kind of goes full circle back to the fact that when you're in a war zone, you are existing at a certain emotional, psychological level. You're speaking of your amygdala, right? Speaking of your fight or flight, you're revving at 10,000 RPMs.
Sure.
All the time.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas you're doing that for months on deployment, you're out for 9 months or you're out for a year, whatever. You come back and you're home for a month and suddenly you're walking around Santa Monica getting ice cream and you're still revving at 10,000 RPMs.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's got to be incredibly jarring, and everything is startling or reminding or triggering or whatever it is. When you're in a war zone, it's actually a good place to be. You kind of want to be revving at 10,000 RPMs to kind of keep your head on a swivel. But when you're in Santa Monica getting ice cream, it ultimately wears you down just like an engine.
That is completely true. I mean, I'll tell you that it took me, I don't know, a few years of when I was driving, driving down, a road, not like in New York, not in the streets or whatever, but like out, wherever on a road. And if there was a car parked on the side of the street, to not just drive in the middle of the street, almost everywhere I went.
Yeah.
The middle of the road.
Yeah.
And it's not because I think that there's an IED in that car. It's just because it's
training.
It's training.
It's what conditioned. I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely that okay, I went from this, and not only did I go from a place where I'm revving at like 10,000 RPM, but I went from a place where there was a camaraderie. Like it was like being a part of any other group, right? At a college or whatever, in that there was a shared camaraderie. Like I didn't know everybody on the base, or I didn't know all these people in the chow hall. But we were all there, living a shared experience.
Sure.
Right? Like there were certain things that we all took for granted. And then when I come out into the world, I go places and I don't have that shared experience with people. And then, then people, they're like, when you're in a military and when you're in line for a chow hall in the military, for instance, nobody's cutting in front of you. You know what I mean? Like nobody's cutting in front of you. Like there are ways that, and then you get out here and somebody cuts in front of you. You're like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? Like, wait, this is not how the world works. So there's just a lot of things. And then again, like I said, there's the isolation factor. I don't have shared experiences with these people. I don't know how to connect with these people. A lot of these people are afraid of me now because of the whole, like when they were talking about putting soldiers or veterans at schools as security, all the comments that I saw about, oh no, they might have post-traumatic stress and SNAP. It's like, it's like, so you people are afraid of veterans. That's where we're at right now.
No, and everything you're saying contributes to the whole experience of what has been kind of lumped in as PTSD.
Yes, I believe so. I believe there's a huge transition and isolation problem that is not being addressed.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that all kind of what PTSD is though?
Well, see, PTSD is sort of a multidisciplinary sort of like, there are multiple symptoms for it, right?
Okay.
It's like we take this, and this, and then we say a person has post-traumatic stress.
Right.
Because a person might have intrusive thoughts, but we might not label as post-traumatic stress. They might have these things, but they might
have depression, but they don't have post-traumatic stress. But yeah,
exactly.
I gotcha.
So
but if you mix them, if you get the recipe mixed up right, then it equals PTSD.
Correct. Right. And then there are, and there are some success, there are ways of treating post-traumatic stress, but I also feel, and one of the ways, of treating post-traumatic stress, obviously, is getting people into support groups. But again, we start talking about sort of shared community.
Yeah.
And something that, again, I think that veterans suffer from often is, again, I don't believe there's a such thing as a transition. As a veteran, you more or less have to reinvent yourself. You have to find a new life,
right.
New passions and everything else. And I think the people who hold on the tightest to their time in the military are the ones who might have one of the largest challenges in like finding new footing.
Sure. No, I think it's a very interesting point that you do have to reinvent yourself. And it sounds like that's what you've done and continue to do, with becoming a coach and a trainer. And, it sounds like that's the path. That's the path that you've taken, and I'm hoping it sounds like it's served you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I went, I became the coach and the trainer, and then interestingly enough, as a coach, because I did that full time for 4 years, and then found that once again, the isolation, the working by myself did not serve me.
Right.
And you have clients and you work with people, but they're not your friends. I mean, you're friendly with them, but
Sure.
They're not the people you're hanging out with. So, and so I started working as I told you, as a bodyguard and doing other stuff. And then I got into acting, which I find to be extremely collaborative and group oriented. And it's very reminiscent of a military environment in certain ways.
Yeah. I mean, there's a unified goal. We're all on it. We're all achieving a common mission. I mean, and I'm putting this into military terms because obviously we're not saving the world, but the dynamic of collaboration, solving problems, I think is maybe the parallel you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The idea of the team, you have the cast and you have the crew and, and everybody's doing their part and everybody else is kind of helping it,
Yeah. And we can't do it without the other.
Correct.
And that's a big part of the set being on a set. There is that camaraderie of we're all in this crazy thing together, and come hell or high water, this could go really well or this could go really bad. You just never,
right.
And you never know. And you're kind of in it together.
Yeah.
And I mean, like when I'm sitting there watching somebody else on the hot seat doing their close up and they're getting the yips or they're, you know what I mean? They're shitting the bed. I feel for them.
Yeah.
And when they're crushing it, I feel for them. You know, it's that kind of shared experience. So I hear you. The agreement of it feels so awkward because it so seems like not at all what, you know, the military is.
Right. No, I totally get it.
But I hear
totally
you.
Get it. You'll just have to take my word for it.
You know, you're saying it. I'm agreeing. So I'm like, sounds good. He said so. But it's awesome, man. I'm very happy that we got to work together and that we actually, you know, I don't believe really in accidents, but I'm really grateful that we happened upon each other's common interests and this dialogue was born out of it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and you're right. Because I think we were trying to have this conversation while they were while
in between
while
takes.
It
would literally be we would start the conversation. You would start saying something really intriguing. I would ask you another question. You would start answering it, and then we'd say, "Cut. Okay, go back. Do this over here." And then we'd have to go back to doing our job, and then we go back, and then we continue the conversation in another fragment, and then I go back and another fragment, another fragment. You know, we weren't doing a Scorsese film. You know, we were doing a commercial. As far as our, you know, as far as our character, as far as our character was concerned, we weren't really destroying anything like that. So either way around it, it was very funny to try to fragment a conversation like this, which is what we did. We literally had a conversation like this in fragments. But I'm glad that we ended up getting to find the time to do this. I really appreciate your taking the time. Best of luck with everything that you're up to, and keep me in the loop. I love these kinds of conversations. I look forward to hearing how things continue to unfold for you in your career in all levels, whether it's acting and or coaching and training. So keep me posted.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you being on the podcast, dude.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
All right, man. Thanks everybody for listening to another episode of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy, and stay tuned for more episodes of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Check out my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com. Stay connected on Instagram at Breakthroughs with Jordan and Twitter at Jordan D. Murphy. And if you have a great story to share, as I'm sure many of you do, go to my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com and shoot me an abbreviated version of your story to my email. I'll give it a read and maybe share a couple of them on the show.